Hi guys, in this video we will have a closer look at the Naalu Collective, a faction that has an ability that allows you to score first in every single status phase. You also get, at least in my opinion, the very best agent of them all. And you also get some extremely powerful fighters. Where did you get that from?
What?
Hey, I did not take that out of the box.
No, I took it out of the box.
You put it back.
Take it easy.
But of course we will look at all the abilities that this faction has, and we will have a look at how you can play the first game round to get the best of it, and I will also recommend some technologies to research.
Alright, let's get started.
Sure, and first we'll have a look at their home system and the starting units.
They start with a single carrier, a cruiser, a destroyer, 3 fighters, 4 infantry, a space dock and a PDS. And make sure to place the space dock on Chuchua here, because it is a free resource planet. So with that you can produce up to 5 units every time you activate the space dock. And the PDS you can place on whatever planet you like. Honestly, this is not an optimal starting fleet because we only have a single ship with capacity. And since we want to gain control of as many planets as possible in round 1, we need at least 2 ships to do so. But of course we do get a little help from the agent here, but I'm not going to spoil just yet what she can do.
Which technologies does Naalu start with?
Naalu starts with both Sarween tools and Naalu motivator, so let's have a closer look at those.
Sarween tools, when 1 or more of your units use production, reduce the combined cost of the produced units by 1. And I think this is an excellent technology to start with, because it will improve your economy right from the beginning of the game. Then next up we have the Naalu motivator. During the status phase, draw 2 action cards instead of 1. And again, this is an excellent technology to start with, because you will get an additional action card in every single status phase throughout the entire game. And you can be lucky to draw one that can help you immediately with either becoming stronger or maybe even scoring a victory point. And additionally, it is also a green technology, so this is on the way to the Hybrid Crystal Fighter 2, but we will get back to that a little later in the video.
Those are some really good starting technologies, but they are also very common. Do you have something where Naalu really stands out?
That's easy. Let's talk about the agent.
It is called Sue, and we got a much better version of this agent with the Codex 3 update, so make sure to update the Naalu Collective with this one. It's an action. Exhaust this card and choose a player. That player may perform a tactical action in a non-home system without placing a command token. That system still counts as being activated. And this is huge because it can help us solve our capacity problem in round 1. We only have a single carrier with capacity, so now we can use the agent to move the units out here, gain control of these 2 planets. But look, the system has not been locked down by a command token, and that means that the carrier is free to move out to an additional system in the very same game round. So this is really beneficial, but that is not the only use. Let's say that you have a forward space dock out on Lysis here, and again you can use the agent to activate this system, and then you can produce units on the space dock, because that is step 5 here in the tactical action order. And again, that means that you can produce units without locking them down with a command token, so those units are able to fly out and benefit you right from the same game round as they were produced. But it doesn't stop here, it gets even better, because we will need a blue technology to research the Hybrid Crystal Fighter 2, and you want that, but I'll get back to that a little later. And that blue technology could be the Dark Energy tab, because this will allow you to explore the frontier tokens. And again, you can use the agent here to activate this system, move your destroyer out, and start exploring the frontier tokens completely for free. So in my opinion, this is one of the very best agents in the game.
Okay, so this is a free command token in every game round, just like Federation of Sol, or if you research hypermetabolism.
And now, let's move on to one of our faction abilities called Foresight.
And just ignore telepathic for now, we'll get back to that later. Foresight. After another player moves ships into a system that contains one or more of your ships, you may place one token from your strategy pool in an adjacent system that does not contain another player's ships. Move your ships from the active system into that system. So let's say that the Imperium player here activates in this system, and we really don't want to participate in space combat here because there is a big risk that we will lose it. So instead we can use a token from our strategy pool and move them into an adjacent system, simply retreat into an adjacent system. The only requirement is that it does not contain another player's ships. And heck, we could even retreat into this system the Imperium player came from and also give him a little something to think about.
It doesn't sound like this is an ability you would use that often.
No, I'm not entirely sure. But of course, if your command token economy is good, then it is convenient to avoid space combat. But I think it will vary a lot from game to game.
What about their faction technologies? Will you be researching those?
Yes, at least one of them. But that is not the one I'm going to demonstrate now.
And the first one is called Neuroglaive. After another player activates a system that contains one or more of your ships, that player removes one token from his fleet pool and returns it to his reinforcements. And this technology is so strong that it requires 3 green technologies before you can research it. And I think that makes perfectly sense, because the ability of removing one command token from the other player and thus reducing how many ships they can attack you with is so extremely good. I remember a recent game where another player was playing Naalu. He held Megator Rex and he also rushed to get the Neuroglaive technology. And that just made it so much harder for the rest of us to try and take that planet away from him. Because not only are we reducing our firepower against the Naalu player when trying to take Megator Rex away from him, we also get weaker towards all the other players at the table.
But what about those crystal fighters you mentioned in the beginning of the video?
Yeah, I mean, the base version is good, but the upgraded version is even better. But I'll get back to that in a minute. First, we'll have a look at how the first round can be played.
Sounds good. And what should I pay special attention to?
Yes, always remember to use your agent. And since your starting unit doesn't really have any issues, you get to choose between producing more units or researching technology. But I think that highly depends on which strategy card you get. But let's have a closer look in Tabletop Simulator.
Yes, let's have a look at how the first round can go. And I have selected my 3 favorite strategy cards for Naalu in round 1. First up we got Trade, then we have Technology, and we got Construction. All 3 of these are pretty straightforward. With Trade we get free trade goods and we get to replenish our commodities. And by picking this card, then we can both produce new units and also do the secondary of Technology, which is also a card that is very often picked in the first round. So this is a really strong start for Naalu. And my third pick would be Construction, so that we can place a PDS and a space dock on planets we control. But for round 1 it is primarily for getting the space dock out. We could for instance place it on Lysis here, and then we can use our agent to activate that system with the space dock in it, and then we get to produce units without locking the system down. But for this first round demonstration I will take the Technology card, place the Naalu 0 token on top of it, so everybody knows that we goes first. And as our very first action, I would actually use the agent here to activate Lysis and Wellknow and fly out there with our carrier. Let's bring 3 infantry because we want to move the carrier even further. And we can also bring the other units because we don't lock the system down with the agent, which is awesome. And let's see what we get on Lysis here. Get a green tech skip. That is just fine. And on Wellknow, local fabricators, you may gain 1 commodity. I don't have to read the rest of it. We will just get a commodity. Then the rest of the table takes their turns. And when it gets to be us again, I would play the Technology card. And then I would research Dark Energy tab for free. And with that, we can explore these frontier tokens. And that is exactly what I would do as my third action.
So we could activate here. We have used the agent, so now we need to use the tactical tokens. We can fly out there with a destroyer. Have a look here. Enigmatic device. Place this card face up in your place area. It's an action. You may spend 6 resources and purge this card to research one technology. It's not exactly cheap to do it this way, but it's actually a really good thing for Naalu because we have a really strong economy, because we will produce a lot of fighters and they don't cost that much. That was our first 3 actions. Potentially be waiting for the warfare player to play his strategy card so that we can produce units in our home system. But until he does that, let's move out here to Archon Vale. Let's move our carrier, cruiser, fighter, and of course an infantry, so we can also take the planet. Have a look, see what we get. Lasak survivors. Attach. This planet's resource value is increased by 1 and its influence value is increased by 2. That was pretty lucky on this planet, so now it's a 2 resource and 5 influence planet. That is pretty awesome. And now let's just say that the warfare player plays his card. So we'll spend a token from our strategy pool, and we got 3 resources on our home planet here we can use, and Sarween tools, so that gives us a production economy of 4. So for that we can build a carrier and 2 infantry. And then we need to pay, of course. And then as our last action we can go to perimeter here. Let's move our carrier and bring a couple of fighters. Not the space dock, a couple of fighters for protection. And let's have a look at perimeter. What do we get? A yellow tech skip. Not exactly what we were looking for. But with this, we have gained control of planets in 3 systems. We also got an infantry adjacent to Megator Rex, which means that we have unlocked our commander, so that we can look at our neighbor's hands of promissory notes and the top and bottom card of the agenda deck. We have also produced some more units and researched Dark Energy Tab, and even explored one of those tokens. So with this strategy, I think we have gotten a really good first round. The only drawback here is that we may not have used Marluk here with 2 influence on it. With a little bit of luck, we could trade this commodity to a trade good, so that we could potentially buy 1 more command token when one of the other players played leadership.
Alright, so the first round seems pretty straightforward. But what about those crystal fighters? I want to hear about those.
Yes, I'm almost ready for that. But first, let's have a look at the commander and the hero.
We'll start with the commander called Aban. And to unlock her, we need to have ground forces either in or adjacent to the Megator Rex system. And when we do that, it says, at any time, you may look at your neighbor's hands of promissory notes and the top and bottom card of the agenda deck. I don't think the first part of it is really interesting. At least in the games I play, we don't trade the promissory notes that much, so we often know which ones they have left in their hands. But the bottom part of it, where we can look at the agenda deck, is really interesting, because at any time, so even during the action phase, you can look at the top card and see what will the first agenda be whenever we reach the agenda phase. But it is also really interesting if another player has played the politics card, because then that player gets to look at the 2 top cards and either keep both of them at the top or put both of them in the bottom, or 1 in each place. So with the commander, you can have a look at and see which agenda that player may have discarded, and you still also know what is the top one, so you can eventually prepare for that during the action phase.
Yeah, so knowing the top card of the agenda deck is of course always nice, especially if you can prepare something during the action phase. But enough about this, what about the hero?
The hero is called the Oracle, and to unlock her, we need to have 3 scored objectives. At the end of the status phase, you may force each other player to give you 1 promissory note from their hand. If you do, purge this card. And here I cannot stop myself from quoting Forrest Gump. Life is like a box of chocolates, you never know what you're gonna get. And that's the same here. There are 5 different promissory notes, and you don't know which one you will get from the other players. You could be lucky to get a trade agreement that will give you an equal amount of trade goods, compared to the other player's commodities. You could also be lucky to get a support for the throne that will give you a victory point. Unless you attack that other player, then you will lose that victory point once again. Most likely, you will get a political secret. By itself, it's not very interesting, but if you get a handful of these, then you can absolutely dominate one of the agenda phases. You could also get the alliance card, and that is just another box of chocolates, because that will give you access to that player's commander ability, and whatever that is depends entirely on which other factions are in the game. But you could also, most unlikely, get access to the most powerful promissory note of them all, which is a ceasefire. So if you have a ceasefire from another player in your hand, and that player attacks you, play the ceasefire card, and then that player is not allowed to move units into the active system. And this is a really strong way to prevent that other player from either attacking or trying to winslay you. So all in all, I don't think the hero is a game-changing one or a potentially game-winning one for you, but at least you will get some good stuff out of it.
Yes, this is all good and exciting. But what about those crystal fighters?
Yes, we are now getting to the fighter-related abilities, and we will start with the flagship.
It's called the Matriarch, costs 8 as usual, then it has a lousy combat strength because it rolls 2 dice and only hits on 9 and 10. It got movement 1 and capacity 6. But I think there's a good reason for it to not be really good at space combat, because if we look at the ability here, it says, during an invasion in this system, you may commit fighters to planets as if they were ground forces. At the end of the combat, return those units to the space area. And it might as well say ground combat here, because your fighters are fighting in ground combat along with your infantry and your mechs.
That is actually a pretty strong ability. But can I gain control of a planet only by using those fighters?
No, you cannot. Right after the ground combat has ended, all the fighters are returned back up into the flagship, and then you establish control. So you will need at least 1 mech or 1 infantry to gain control of the planet.
And what about the mechs here? Are they related to the fighters in any way?
Yes, they are. And in fact, I actually think that the mech ability makes Naalu a little too overpowered. I think their ability should be weakened just a little bit.
The mechs are called Iconoclasts. And we also got an updated version of this with the Codex 3. But if we look at the stats first, then it got sustained damage, it costs 2, rolls 1 die that hits on a 6 and above, which is very normal, nothing special here. But what makes this unit overpowered, in my opinion, is that it has this ability. Other players cannot use anti-fighter barrage against your units in this system. And of course, units here refer to the hybrid crystal fighters. I know we haven't talked about it yet. It will be the next ability we look at. But Naalu can produce a ton of these dirt cheap, super powerful units. And with just a single mech in the same system, then they are completely immune to anti-fighter barrage. And I simply think this is a bit too overpowered. So let's say that another player researches Destroyer 2, so instead of anti-fighter barrage that hits on a 9, then they get anti-fighter barrage that hits on a 6. And I think a more reasonable ability here is that the anti-fighter barrage is nerfed, so it maybe only hits on a 7 or an 8, so -1 or -2, making it harder to hit them and not just make them completely immune to anti-fighter barrage. So basically, make sure to put 1 mech in your home system, produce a ton of crystal fighters there, and then you can enjoy the struggle from the other players if they want to take your home system away from you.
And we haven't even talked about the upgraded unit yet.
And speaking of fighters, let's finally have a look at those hybrid crystal fighters.
So the basic stats are that you can produce 2 units for the cost of 1 resource. Then it gets a little bit better than the standard fighter because you hit on an 8 instead of a 9. And then the basic unit still needs to be transported. But when you upgrade it to the Crystal Fighter 2, I'm not saying if, I'm saying when, because of course you want to do this, then the cost is the same, but now it hits on a 7 and above, and you get movement 2. So you get a unit that is just as strong as a cruiser, but it only costs a quarter of it. So instead of producing a single cruiser for 2 resources, you can now produce 4 fighters for the same. And it gets even better, because it says, each fighter in excess of your ship's capacity count as half of a ship against your fleet pool. So yes, you can still have 4 fighters on your carrier, but then for each additional token you have, so this is for the carrier, then you can have 2 fighters and 2 more fighters for a total of 8 fighters in a system with a carrier. I mean, that is similar to have a carrier and 8 cruisers in the same system, which is extremely strong. And remember, you can reinforce it even further with your mechs that makes your fighters completely immune to anti-fighter barrage. So of course you want to have a mech in your home system along with a ton of fighters. And you can of course do the same if you hold Megator Rex or you need to protect a forward dock or any other sensitive system to you.
They sound extremely good. So how soon in a game will you research them?
I would get them as soon as possible. I would probably start with Dark Energy tab, then I would research Hybrid Crystal Fighter 2, and then whenever possible I would use the agent to explore 2 frontier tokens in every game round. But hey, now we're talking technology, let's just jump right into it.
Yes, let's have a look at technology. We start with Neural Motivator, so we get to draw 2 action cards instead of 1 in the status phase. And we also start with Sarween Tools that gives us a production discount of 1 whenever one of our units use production. The first technology I would get is probably Dark Energy tab, so that we can explore these frontier tokens out here. They will always provide you with something good. Something is of course better than others, but it can usually be command tokens, trade goods, you can find the legendary planet, you can find wormholes, all kinds of good stuff. And when we have both the green and the blue technology, we have the prerequisites to get the Hybrid Crystal Fighter 2, and I will get this as my second technology. Again, now the fighters don't need to be transported, they can fly out by themselves, so now you can actually use your fighters to go explore these frontier tokens. And at the same time, you just let them be wherever they land, because then they will be in the way, protecting your slice. The next technology I will get is Gravity Drive. It is always a good technology. After you activate a system, apply +1 to the move value of one of your ships during this tactical action. This often refers to the carrier because the base value is just movement 1. So ironically, the next technology I would get is the carrier 2. And let me just bring it down here. So what you get from upgrading from carrier 1 to carrier 2 is the extra capacity. So you go from 4 to 6, but also the movement value is increased from 1 to 2. But again, Gravity Drive can help one of your units catch up in case they need to fly along with your carriers that got movement 2 and your Hybrid Crystal Fighters that got movement 2. And remember that when they are upgraded, you can both have them on the carrier and they can fly by themselves. So now you can have really many fighters in the same system. And lastly, I would go for Fleet Logistics. During each of your turns of the action phase, you may perform 2 actions instead of 1. And especially for Naalu, since we have the telepathic ability, so we always goes first, that means that we can also pick the Imperial card, still take our turn as the first one. So that basically means we could grab Megator Rex as the first turn, and then we could play the Imperial card as our second action due to Fleet Logistics. And normally the other players would have a chance of trying to take Megator Rex away from you before you could play the Imperial card. So all in all, Fleet Logistics is a strong technology by itself, but I think with the Naalu telepathic token here, it is even stronger. And that is actually it. I would go for these 5 technologies. So sorry, Naalu Collective, there's not room for you in this recommendation.
The tech path is pretty straightforward. You can, if you like, of course, deviate from these, but I think this is a really good lineup.
Even though both the agent and the Hybrid Crystal Fighters are really good, I've still saved the very best ability for last.
And it is called Telepathic. At the end of the strategy phase, place the Naalu 0 token on your strategy card. You are first in initiative order. And this may seem insignificant at first glance, but it certainly isn't. But of course it does what it says. You get to place the Naalu token on top of the initiative number here, and then you are the very first in the upcoming game round. But that also means that if you control Megator Rex and you take the Imperial card here, and we control Megator Rex, then Since you go first, you can play the Imperial card as your very first action, score that precious victory point, where normally all the other players would have a chance to take a turn and take the planet away from you before you can do so. But what is even more important is that you get to score first when we reach the status phase, so you will always be the very first to score either public and secret objectives. And as you know, the first player who gets either 10 or 14 points wins the game. So being first in the status phase is absolutely a winning ability to have. And that is also why a lot of players, when the game reaches what they expect to be the second last game round, they will go for the politics card, then become speaker themselves. And then when we reach what they expect to be the last game round, they will pick the leadership card, because then they will score first in the status phase. But because the Naalu got this faction ability, then it removes this part of the game entirely.
What about the faction promissory note?
Where did you get that from?
What?
Hey, I did not take that out of the box.
No, I took it out of the box.
You put it back.
Take it easy.
Put it in the bottom.
But why? What's wrong with it?
The Gift of Prescience. At the end of the strategy phase, place this card face up in your play area and place the Naalu 0 token on your strategy card. You are first in initiative order. The Naalu player cannot use his telepathic faction ability during this game round. Return this card to the Naalu player at the end of the status phase.
I don't think I've ever seen a Naalu player hand out their promissory note. There are probably examples out there, but personally I would never do it. I simply can't find a reason to do so. And you risk the other player is taking the win right in front of you.
Alright, that was the last Naalu ability.
Please consider supporting the channel by becoming a Patreon member or a YouTube member. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.